My name is Chloe Watson. I'm 38 years old, and until about 3 weeks ago, I believed that if you built your life carefully enough, nothing really collapsed without warning. Not overnight, not without signs. I work as a project manager for a mid-sized construction firm in Phoenix. My days are structured, predictable. I leave early, deal with contractors, timelines, budgets, problems that can be solved if you have enough information. I'm usually home by 6 unless the site runs late. I like that kind of life. Measured, controlled, stable. And for a long time, I thought my relationship reflected that. Ethan Cole is 36, charismatic in a way that doesn't feel forced, the kind of man who knows exactly how he's being perceived at any given moment. He works in marketing for a regional retail chain. Presentation is everything to him. How things look, how they feel, how they're interpreted. We had been together for 9 years. We lived in a house I bought before we met. Quiet neighborhood, 2 cars, shared bills, shared routines. From the outside, it looked balanced. Inside, it was more complicated. Ethan has always had a sharp edge to him. Not loud, not explosive, just precise. He notices small things and corrects them, sometimes in front of other people, sometimes quietly, like he's improving something that's slightly off. At the beginning, it didn't bother me. It felt like attention to detail. Over time, it became something else. If I loaded the dishwasher differently than he preferred, he would redo it while explaining why my way created more work. If I forgot something from the grocery list, it became a comment about how I don't pay attention. Small things, repeated often enough to stop feeling small. I addressed it directly in March. I told him the constant criticism was wearing on me, that it felt less like partnership and more like evaluation. He didn't raise his voice. He just looked at me and said, "If things were handled properly the first time, I wouldn't have to step in." I suggested counseling. He said therapy was for couples who were actually failing. That was the end of that conversation. The last 3 months felt different. Not worse in an obvious way, just quieter, more distance where there used to be ease. He started guarding his phone more, taking calls outside, in the garage, on the patio. When I asked, he said he was dealing with a difficult client, didn't want background noise. It made sense, or at least it made enough sense that I didn't push. I didn't go looking for proof of anything. I focused on work, on routine. I believed that if something was wrong, it would eventually show itself in a way that couldn't be explained away. It did, just not in the way I expected. The call happened on a Wednesday afternoon. I was sitting in a job site trailer, reviewing change orders. My phone buzzed in my pocket. I glanced down and saw Ethan's name. I assumed it was something quick. Dinner, groceries, a package. I answered without thinking. I didn't say anything right away, because I could already hear his voice. It sounded slightly distant, echoing. Speaker, but he wasn't talking to me. He was laughing, and that was the first thing that felt wrong. I hadn't heard him laugh like that in months. Not with me, not at home. It was lighter, easier, unfiltered. There was another voice, a woman, familiar in the way that certain tones are, not because you know them well, but because they sound comfortable. I stayed silent. Something in me understood immediately that speaking would change what I was about to hear. Then Ethan said it. He's so predictable. I swear I could map out her reactions before she even has them. There was a pause. The woman said something I couldn't fully catch. Ethan laughed again. I'm serious. Chloe's easy to manage. She doesn't think strategically. My hand tightened around the phone. I didn't move. Didn't breathe the way I normally would. He kept talking. Said he was just waiting until things were lined up financially. That once everything was in place, he'd be done. Clean exit. No mess. No surprises. The woman asked if I had any idea. He said no. Said I wouldn't suspect anything because I don't operate that way. I felt it physically before I processed it mentally. Cold hands, slower breathing, not panic, something else, something quieter. Clarity. I didn't interrupt. I didn't hang up. I hit record. I don't normally record calls. I'm not someone who collects leverage. But in that moment, I understood something very clearly. If I confronted him without proof, he would deny it, reframe it, turn it into something about me. I had seen that pattern before, in smaller ways. The call lasted maybe 4 minutes. They talked about Friday. He said he'd tell me he had a late client dinner. She laughed. When he finally noticed the line was still connected, his tone shifted instantly. Chloe, he said, controlled, careful. I ended the call without answering. I sat there for a few minutes, staring at the trailer wall. Then I replayed the recording. Once. That was enough. I didn't call him back. I finished reviewing the change orders, closed out the workday exactly the way I always do. When I got home, Ethan was at the kitchen counter, scrolling on his phone. He looked up. "Hey, how was the site?" "Normal tone, slightly distracted," I answered normally. Asked about his day. He complained about a coworker missing a deadline. Said he might have to work late Friday to clean things up. He said it casually, like it had just occurred to him. I nodded. Yeah, that makes sense. I watched him more closely that night. Not emotionally. Analytically. He was relaxed, comfortable. The same patterns as always. He corrected the way I folded a towel after dinner. Made a comment about how I chewed too loudly. Nothing in his behavior suggested he thought anything had gone wrong earlier that day. I didn't bring up the call. Instead, I emailed the audio file to a secure account I use for work backups. Then I saved a copy to a flash drive in my desk. I didn't know exactly how I would use it yet, but I understood one thing. Whatever happened next, I needed to be prepared. That night, after Ethan went to bed, I stayed in my office with the door half closed and the desk lamp on. The house was quiet in that heavy way. Houses become quiet when something inside them has already broken. I opened our financial records. Joint checking, joint savings, mortgage payments, utility accounts, car insurance, credit cards. My income covered about 60% of our shared expenses, but Ethan contributed consistently. We had separate retirement accounts through work. No children, no shared business, no complicated investments beyond the house. On paper, everything looked manageable, and that bothered me more than I expected. Because when Ethan said he was waiting until things were lined up financially, he didn't sound uncertain. He sounded like someone following a plan. I searched recent transactions for anything unusual. Large withdrawals, strange transfers, credit card spikes, nothing obvious. That meant either there was nothing yet, or I wasn't looking in the right place. The next morning, I called a divorce attorney before work. I kept my voice steady as I explained that my boyfriend and I had lived together for years, shared a home and finances, and that I had reason to believe he was planning a hidden exit while coordinating with another woman. I didn't say mistress. I didn't say affair. Those words felt too emotional for the kind of conversation I needed to have. The receptionist scheduled me for Friday morning. At work, I functioned normally. Meetings, contractor updates, budget approvals. Every hour felt strangely clean because numbers still behaved the way they were supposed to. A cost overrun was still a cost overrun. A delayed shipment was still a delayed shipment. At home, Ethan behaved exactly like himself. He mentioned Friday again after dinner. "I might be late," he said, rinsing his plate. "Client dinner, probably downtown." "Okay," I said. He glanced over his shoulder, maybe checking for annoyance. I gave him nothing. Friday morning, I took a half day and met with the attorney. I brought printed bank statements, the mortgage documents, account summaries, insurance papers, everything organized in a folder. The attorney asked direct questions. Length of relationship, whose name was on the house, whether Ethan had legal ownership, whether we had children, whether there had been domestic issues, whether he had access to accounts I didn't regularly monitor. I answered clearly, 9 years together. House in my name, though he had contributed to household bills. No children, no police reports, no shared business. Then I told him about the recording. He didn't react emotionally. He just nodded and said, "Don't confront him until you are ready to act." That sentence stayed with me. He explained what steps mattered. Protect documents, avoid financial retaliation, keep records, do not empty shared accounts, and put all future communication about money in writing when possible. Because we were not legally married, it was not a divorce in the formal sense, but after 9 years of shared finances and cohabitation, the separation still had legal and financial consequences. The house was the biggest issue. If Ethan tried to claim reimbursement or equitable interest because of contributions, we would need documentation. If he tried to remove money from shared accounts, we needed a clear timeline. The attorney helped draft a formal separation notice and a proposal for dividing shared funds and household responsibilities while Ethan moved out. I left with a folder in my hand and a strange calm sitting in my chest. That evening, Ethan got ready slowly. He wore a shirt he hadn't worn in months. He checked his reflection twice. Used cologne I used to like before I realized certain scents could become evidence. "You look nice," I said. He smiled, distracted. "Client dinner." "Right." He left around 7. I waited 15 minutes. Then I checked the shared location app we had both used for years. Convenience, safety, grocery coordination, nothing dramatic. His phone was not downtown. It was at a residential address across town, a townhouse complex. I took a screenshot. I did not drive there. I did not call. I sat at the kitchen table with my laptop open and the house around me feeling too large. I played the recording once more, not because I needed to hear the insult again, because I needed to remind myself that doubt was only useful when facts were unclear. The facts were no longer unclear. Ethan came home a little after 11. I was on the couch with a documentary playing low. He walked in like it was a normal night, set his keys down, loosened his collar. Long dinner, he said. Client had a million questions. Where'd you go? Briar and Stone, he answered quickly. Too quickly. Downtown restaurant. Expensive, loud, believable. I nodded. Traffic wasn't bad? He hesitated for half a second. No, we took a different route. I let it go. The next morning, I searched the address from the location app. The townhouse belonged to a woman named Natalie Reed. I knew the name. Not well, not personally, but enough. Natalie was Ethan's ex-girlfriend from before we met. He had always described her as old history, the kind of person who occasionally liked his posts but meant nothing. Years ago, she had been at a barbecue at our house with a group from Ethan's work circle. I remembered her because she had looked at our kitchen too long, then smiled at me like she knew where everything belonged. At the time, I told myself I was imagining it. Now I wasn't so sure. Her LinkedIn profile listed her as a regional sales consultant for a vendor Ethan's company used. So it wasn't random. It wasn't distant. It wasn't history. It was access. On Sunday morning, I went back to the attorney's office and signed the finalized documents for formal separation and property protection. I requested that Ethan receive them at work, not to humiliate him, to avoid a volatile reaction inside my house. That distinction mattered to me. I wasn't trying to create a scene. I was trying to end one before it started. The attorney said it would likely take 48 hours. I went home and spent the afternoon organizing my personal documents. Passport, birth certificate, tax records, property documents, insurance policies. I moved them into a locked drawer in my office. That night, Ethan criticized the way I parked in the driveway. You always leave too little space on my side, he said. I looked at him for a moment. Then I moved the car. No argument. No warning. 2 days later, around 3 in the afternoon, my phone rang. Ethan. When I answered, his voice was tight. Do you know anything about someone coming to my office? I stood beside my desk at work, looking out through the glass wall at people moving through the hallway. Yes, I said. A pause. What is this supposed to mean? It means I'm ending the relationship. Another pause, longer this time. Then his tone sharpened. Are you serious, Chloe? Yes. Normal people talk before doing something like this. I almost laughed. Not because it was funny. Because of how easily he reached for normal after everything he had done in secret. We can discuss logistics tonight, I said. He exhaled hard into the phone. This is insane. No, I said quietly. It's prepared. Then I ended the call. Ethan came home early that evening. Earlier than I had expected. The front door opened with more force than necessary, the sound sharp against the quiet of the house. I was in the kitchen, standing by the counter, my hands resting flat against the surface as if I needed something solid beneath them. He walked in holding the envelope. Not loosely, not casually. Tightly, like it had personally offended him. What is this? He demanded. His voice wasn't loud, but it carried. Controlled anger, the kind that expects to be obeyed. I didn't answer immediately. Sit down, I said. That threw him off for half a second. He wasn't used to being given instructions by me, not like that, not without explanation. Chloe. Sit down, I repeated, still calm. He hesitated. Then, slowly, he dropped the envelope on the table and pulled out a chair. I picked up my phone. I didn't look at him. Not yet. I opened the recording. Pressed play. At first, the room filled with that familiar sound, his laugh. Light, easy, unburdened. Then the words followed. Clear, undeniable. She's so predictable. She's easy to manage. I'll be done once things are lined up financially. I kept my eyes on the phone screen, watching the time bar move instead of watching him react. I didn't need to see his face to know exactly when it hit him. The shift in the air was enough. When the recording ended, the silence that followed felt heavier than anything he could have said. He didn't speak for a few seconds. Then, you recorded me? There it was. Not denial. Not even immediate damage control. Just offense. I looked up at him. You called me, I said. I didn't interrupt. His jaw tightened. That's not the point, Chloe. You don't just record private conversations. Private? I repeated softly. He leaned back in the chair, running a hand through his hair. This is exactly what I mean, he said. You take one thing out of context and blow it up into this. I didn't respond right away. Instead, I let the silence sit between us long enough that he had to fill it. I was venting, he continued. People say things they don't mean all the time. What context, I asked evenly, makes lining things up financially before leaving sound like venting? He opened his mouth, closed it, shifted. That's not what you think it is. Then explain it. Another pause. Then he changed direction. You've been distant for months, he said. Emotionally unavailable. Everything with you is schedules and routines and control. Do you know what that feels like to live with? I watched him, really watched him. The way he leaned forward slightly, like he was presenting a case. The way his voice softened just enough to sound reasonable. This wasn't new. It was just clearer now. I suggested counseling, I said. You suggested fixing me, he shot back. That's not the same thing. That's not what I said. That's how it felt. There it was. Reframing. Deflection. He wasn't denying what he said on the call. He was trying to make it irrelevant. I'm not debating feelings, I said quietly. I'm addressing actions. His expression hardened. So you just, what, file paperwork, end everything, no conversation? We had a conversation in March. That's not the same thing and you know it. No, I said. What's not the same is planning an exit while pretending everything is normal. His eyes flickered, just for a second, and that was enough. I didn't think you'd hear it, he said. The moment the words left his mouth, something settled inside me. Not anger, not even hurt, just confirmation. You're right, I said. You didn't. He realized it too. Too late. That's not what I meant, he said quickly. But it didn't matter, because what he meant had already been said. Out loud. Recorded. Saved. We sat there for a moment, the weight of it pressing down on both of us, but in very different ways. Then his tone shifted again. Practical, careful. What happens now? I almost appreciated the question. Almost. We separate, I said. Logistically first. Legally, it's already in motion. You expect me to just accept that? No, I said. I expect you to understand that it's happening. His eyes narrowed slightly. Are you going to tell people? Not yet. Are you going to send that recording to anyone? No. He studied me. Really studied me this time, like he was recalculating something. And court, he asked. Are you planning to use it against me? That depends, I said. If this stays straightforward, it won't matter. That answer seemed to land. Not comfortably, but clearly. What do you want, he asked. An efficient ending, I said. We divide what's shared. You keep what's yours. I keep what's mine. The house gets resolved. No drawn-out fight. You're not even angry, he said. I considered that. I was, I said, on Wednesday, in a job site trailer. He looked away, for the first time since he walked in. I didn't mean what I said like that, he muttered. I didn't respond, because there wasn't a version of that sentence that made sense anymore. I can move into the guest room, he said after a moment. That works. And we just live like that? Temporarily. He nodded slowly, not agreeing, just adjusting. That night, he moved some of his clothes into the guest room. There was no apology, no admission beyond what had already been exposed, just quiet movement. Drawers opening, doors closing. Later, my phone buzzed. A text from him. Can we pause this? Try counseling? I stared at the screen for a long moment. Then I typed back. I'm not interested in rebuilding trust after confirmed deception. Sent. A few hours later, an email. Longer, more measured. He said he felt cornered, that he reacted defensively, that maybe we could redefine things instead of ending them. I didn't reply. I forwarded it to my attorney and asked a simple question. If I pause now, what happens if he changes his position later? The answer came back within the hour. Don't stop the process unless reconciliation is real and consistent. Not words. Actions. That night, Ethan was quieter. Not angry. Not defensive. Just thinking. Around 10, he came into the living room. Sat across from me. Did you talk to her? He asked. I looked up. No. He watched my face closely. Are you going to? No. Are you going to contact her work? Cause problems? No. He exhaled slowly. Some of the tension in his shoulders dropped. Then he said something I don't think he planned to say. She doesn't even know I was serious yet. I blinked once. That I was actually going to leave, he added. There it was. Not confusion. Not a mistake. A timeline. A plan. Does she know you're still living here? I asked. He hesitated. Not exactly. I nodded. And in that moment, something became very simple. I'm not part of whatever you were building, I said. But I'm also not standing in it. He didn't respond, because there wasn't anything left to say that would change the direction we were already moving in. After that night, everything changed in a way that wasn't loud or dramatic. It just narrowed. Conversations became shorter, focused, functional. Groceries, bills, schedules, the house. Nothing else. Ethan stopped trying to explain what had happened. He stopped using words like misunderstanding or overreaction. It was like he realized those arguments didn't work on me anymore, so he redirected his energy somewhere else. Control. Not emotional control. Practical control. 3 days later, I got a notification from our mortgage lender while I was at work. A refinance inquiry, submitted under both of our names. 6:42 a.m. I was already out of the house by then. I didn't call him immediately. I called my attorney first and forwarded the notification. An inquiry doesn't bind you to anything, he said, but it does suggest he's exploring ways to keep the house. Without telling me, I added. Exactly. Don't sign anything. Don't authorize anything. Keep everything in writing. That part was easy. When I got home that evening, Ethan was in the kitchen, leaning against the counter like nothing had shifted. I saw the lender inquiry, I said. He didn't flinch. Yeah, he said, I was going to tell you. When? He shrugged slightly. When it made sense. I watched him for a moment. I don't do well with delayed transparency, I said. It's not a big deal, Chloe, he replied. I'm just trying to be proactive. If I can refinance in my name, we don't have to sell. It simplifies things. It simplifies things for you. That's not fair. Oh, what's not fair, I said calmly, is making financial moves involving joint assets without discussion, especially right now. His jaw tightened. You're micromanaging everything. 2 days before this started, I said, you were planning an exit without telling me. Context matters. He looked away. That was becoming a pattern. So what, he said after a moment. I'm not allowed to look into options? You're allowed to gather information, I said. You're not allowed to act on it without agreement. He exhaled sharply. Fine, then we do it your way. No, I corrected. We do it the documented way. That ended the conversation. Not because we agreed, but because there was nothing left to argue about without repeating the same facts. Over the next 2 weeks, everything became procedural. We split grocery costs. We stopped sharing meals. We set a timeline. If refinancing was approved, we would review terms through mediation. If not, we would list the house. No improvisation, no surprises. We informed our families separately. Minimal details, no blame. Just, we're separating. Ethan didn't mention Natalie again. I didn't ask. It wasn't relevant anymore. Not to the outcome. Not to me. A week later, the refinancing application came back. Denied. His income alone wasn't enough. He told me that in the kitchen, standing in the same place he had stood when he first mentioned the idea. Guess we're selling, he said. I nodded. Okay. No anger. No relief. Just the next step. We listed the house 3 days later. Showings started immediately. People walked through our living room, our kitchen, our bedroom, spaces that had once felt defined by routine and familiarity. Now they were just square footage. We accepted an offer within a month. Closing was scheduled 2 weeks after that. On the day of closing, we sat across from each other at a long table, documents spread out in front of us. The attorney walked us through the paperwork. Sign here, initial here, confirm this. We followed instructions. No conversation beyond what was required. No eye contact unless necessary. At one point, our hands almost brushed when we reached for the same pen. We both pulled back at the same time. That was the closest thing to emotion that day. After the final document was signed, the funds were processed. The house was no longer ours. The accounts were separated. Everything that had been shared, divided into pieces that made sense on paper. Outside, the air felt different. Not lighter, just less complicated. Ethan stood beside his car for a moment, keys in his hand. This isn't how I thought this would go, he said. I believed him. But not in the way he intended. Neither did I replied. He nodded slowly, like he was waiting for something else. An apology. A reaction. A reason to reopen the conversation. I didn't give him any of those. Take care, Chloe, he said finally. You too. And that was it. No dramatic ending. No final argument. Just separation. I moved into a smaller place closer to work. 1 bedroom. Clean lines, quiet. The first morning there, I woke up before my alarm. Out of habit. For a moment, I didn't remember why everything felt different. Then I did. And instead of the weight I expected, there was something else. Not relief. Not happiness. Just clarity. My routine came back quickly. Gym at 6. Work by 8:30. Dinner at home by 7. Predictable. Structured. Mine. The recording still exists. Saved in a folder I haven't opened since the day I filed. I don't revisit it. I don't need to. Because the most important part of that moment wasn't what Ethan said. It was what I chose to do after I heard it.